So, could you really believe that you are the place where God shows up? You know, what would happen if we really started consciously living from that belief that I am the place where God shows up? When I show up, the light of life has shown up in that spot. It's a big thing. So today I just kind of want to talk to you a little bit just from my heart. You know, I've done a lot of lessons over the years that I've been here about relationships, and there are some things that I want to remind you of. And the first one is a Japanese phrase, Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Now, I'm not a Japanese scholar. I don't know the Japanese language, and if any of you do, I apologize for my pronunciation of it. But Yoroshiku onegaishimasu is a Japanese phrase that has no specific meaning, but it is a way to begin a conversation with someone you're meeting for the first time or the zillionth time. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. And what it basically means is, I am here to love you. I am here to work with you. I am so happy to be in your presence. Could you help me? Thank you in advance for helping me. It is an intention of showing up in love and kindness and goodness with another person. You're leading with Yoroshiku onegaishimasu when you're meeting someone for the very first time. Isn't that powerful? Wouldn't that be a powerful way to enter into any conversation? And I was reminded of Yoroshiku onegaishimasu in an interview that I watched one time that I've talked about before, but I want to talk about it again because I think it is powerful. And it was an interview between Bishop T.D. Jakes and Reverend Joel Osteen. So just to catch you up, if you don't know who those two men are, Bishop T.D. Jakes is an African-American spiritual leader and Christian, actually, pastor based in Texas. He's powerful and he's lovely to watch. And he also happens to have a television show. I don't even know if it's still on, but it was on when I saw this. And he interviews people about life and about wisdom. And he was interviewing Reverend Joel Osteen. Now, who Joel Osteen is, if you don't know, he is the pastor of Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. It's a non-denominational Christian church that 52,000 people go on a Sunday in the old Astrodome. They go and they watch Joel Osteen. His talks are also on television. You can see them readily and easily. And Joel Osteen has a very interesting intersection of theology because Joel Osteen teaches Christianity based in the Bible, a very Bible-based message that he gives, but he also talks the way we talk. He talks new thought. He puts a spin on Christianity about change your thinking, change your life, how you show up matters, and what you expect to happen in your life will be the experience of your life. That is not a Christian message. And so therefore, Joel Osteen is right on that edge, and fundamentalist Christians do not like him whatsoever. And us New Thought people are like, ooh, this is an interesting mingling of these two teachings, because we do teach that all paths to God are valid, all religions have something to teach us, and that we honor them all. So his Christian way of talking about the things that we believe is very interesting. He's got my attention. Every now and then I'll just turn on Joel Osteen just to kind of see what he's saying. And he's so uplifting. So those are the two characters in this interview. And T.D. Jakes asked Joel Osteen a question that I loved. And he said, Joel, how do you deal with the haters? How do you deal with the haters? Because there's a lot. And Joel Osteen's reply nailed it. He said, and in his Texas drawl, because he's very southern, his drawl said, "Oh, Bishop, I just assume everybody loves me. I just assume everyone loves me. And so I've watched Joel Osteen live that truth of, I assume everyone loves me. He doesn't care if you're Christian. He doesn't care what you are. He doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat or what, black, white, young, old. He doesn't care. With 52,000 people in his congregation, he does not care. He just assumes that you love him. He approaches other ministers with just as much grace. I understand when he travels, he's one of the most lovely people. The hotel people and everyone talks about Joel Osteen being so loving and kind. He's living Yoroshiku Onigasamas. He approaches everyone, I assume that you love me. Why can't we live that way? The Course in Miracles says this, and this is wrongly attributed to Rumi, but if you think of it as a Rumi quote, it's actually a Course in Miracles quote, but it says, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. What barriers have you built within yourself against the love that is all around you? That's our job, is to seek and remove those barriers. Because what those barriers are is what? Fear, right? So some of us have read the book Lovability this month by Robert Holden about relationships. And Robert Holden's premise of this book is that our basic fear is that we are not lovable. And that is the barrier that we build between ourselves and love. So we kind of go in with a shield, don't we? We go in to any situation with kind of this wait and see, let me make sure they're not going to hurt me kind of attitude. Let me make sure that they'll accept that I'm a fundamentalist Christian and a New Thought minister all wrapped up into one. Let me just go in and assume that they love me. Let me remove the barriers. Let me remove the idea that I'm unlovable and actually assume that people love me. What if we did that? What if we lived like Joel Osteen? What if we lived Hiroshiku Onigasamas like the Japanese people? What if we approached everyone for the first time or the zillionth time with an openness, with no barriers between ourselves and love? You know, I had this dream one time. And I don't remember the particulars of a dream because dreams are weird like that, right? You only remember just a little bitty touch of something. And what I remembered about that dream was the phrase, lead with love. Lead with love. I believe that the dream was at a time when my daughter realized that she had a half-sibling that she didn't know about. And she was afraid about meeting this guy for the first time. And so I was dreaming about that, and I dreamt, lead with love. Lead with love. Go into a situation with love. And I was talking in Sacred Cup this morning about having to practice this lead with love when I first came here as the minister of this community. It's about 5 years. In November, it'll be 5 years, y'all. 5 years. Long time. But when I first got here, I showed up, as you can imagine, with an open heart of love, wanting to love everyone, wanting to kind of blend in seamlessly with this community that was already 7 years old, and just lead with love. Just come in and love everyone. And what I realized is that not everyone was having it. You know, when a new person shows up in a leadership role, perhaps it's not a new minister for you, but maybe it's a new boss or a new leader at work of some sort, or a new teacher of a class or whatever. There's this whole, let's see what she's made of. Let's see what that's about. And, you know, try as I may to lead with love, what I realized that it's not about me. It's about them. It's about all y'all. You get to decide, you know. I just have to be myself. I just have to show up and be the love that I am and let you make up whatever you want to make up about who I am, right? But lead with love anyway. I had to lead with love anyway, right? There's a New Thought author named Joel Goldsmith. I'm talking about Joel's this morning. If any of your name's Joel, I'm sorry. But Joel Goldsmith says this: God and man are one. And there's no way to love God without some of that love flowing out to your neighbor. No way to love God without it kind of splashing out a little bit more. And then Joel Goldsmith goes on, and there's not a quote about this on the slide, but Joel Goldsmith goes on and says that every idea in consciousness is a neighbor. Every idea in consciousness is a neighbor. Love thy neighbor. So what that means is if it crosses your path, it's yours to love. If you have an idea of it, it's yours to love. If it walks in the room, it's yours to love. If it crosses your mind, it's yours to love. It is a neighbor. Love thy neighbor. And this shouldn't be too hard, but we first have to recognize that we are love. We are love. It's who we are. And how to change your life. Ernest Holmes wrote about this. He said, the more you come to realize your true spiritual nature, the more you will be able to let it flow through you and express as your personality. As your personality. Once you know who you are as your soul, that you are the love that is God, then it can express into your human self as your personality. Your personality is how you show up in the world. So no matter what your personality type is, whether you're introvert, extrovert, really organized, really messy, live by a clock or don't, whatever your personality type is, your true nature can express through it once you realize that that's your real identity. You are love. You are love. Once you understand your spiritual nature, you stand firm in it, even when the haters show up. Even when someone challenges you and thinks that you're awful, your true nature is love. Joel Osteen's figuring that out. You kind of stake your holy ground and you don't move from it. So I can tell you, when I first came here, some people decided to pre-hate me. Before I even came in, they're like, I'm not going to like this new minister. Susan was talking about that this morning in Sacred Cup. It's like I was already rejected before I even got here. There are haters out there. But you know what? I decided that I had to be me. And who I was enough. Who I was the love of Spirit showing up as me. And I remember that old Sunday school song. Remember, maybe, I was in Sunday school, and I sang a song that said, I shall not be moved. I shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. I shall not be moved. I will stand here. I will stand here and I shall not be moved from my place of compassion. I shall not be moved from being loving. I shall not be moved from being generous and honoring whoever shows up. And about 2 years ago, I also had a saying that came through me: love who shows up. Who doesn't show up, it's none of my business. Who does show up, we love who shows up. Thanks for showing up for my love today. That's awesome. But I learned this I shall not be moved mentality through some spiritual education that happened for me once I graduated from college. And I want to talk about that for a little bit. So when I went to college, I majored in criminal justice and behavioral science. Okay, so I was always a people person. I was people. My first job out of college was at a women's prison. So I was 22 years old, surrounded by felons. And when you go to prison, if you do something really like little bit naughty and you have to be punished for less than a year, you go to jail. But if you do something big enough that you have to be in for more than a year, at least this was the way it was in Georgia way back when, you go to prison, a state prison. And so I was surrounded by felons who had done something enough that they had to go away for at least a year. And so anything from repeat petty offenders to death row, I had them all. because there was only one women's prison in Georgia at the time. And so here I was exposed to all of these very difficult to love people, and I'm 22. And I realized that there but by the grace of God go I. There was a young inmate who had been at a Christmas party for her job, and she had consumed too much beverages, and she was in a terrible car accident afterwards and ended up killing somebody and had this DUI, vehicular homicide charge. And so here she comes with her 2 broken legs, and she comes into prison, and I thought, that could so be me. That could so be me, right? And so I learned there that these people, while they may be unlovable to everyone else, here I was as a kind, compassionate person in the middle of this. I left there. My next job was at the food stamp eligibility office for Family and Children's Services in Georgia. And I was put on the expedited team, which meant that if I didn't help this person right here, they would go hungry today. So I was dealing with the abject poor, people that were living under bridges, often homeless, and that was half of my caseload. The rest of the caseload was HIV positive men, and this was in the 1980s. I'm aging myself, but and that was my second half of my caseload. And nobody wanted to deal with the HIV positive men with their lesions and all of that. They were terrified of them. And nobody really wanted to work with the abject poor either. And so I learned to have compassion and love for both of these groups of people that basically the world had considered unlovable. And I got to be compassionate and loving on them. Then I got my master's degree in counseling, and I went to work in an inpatient mental health facility. So I'm 20, I'm about 26 at this point. And it was everybody from the psychotic to active suicide to eating disorders that were way out of control to borderline personalities. You name it, I was interacting with them and loving them. So I wasn't trained enough. I had just got my degree, so I wasn't allowed to do anything really important. All I was there for is to just love them, right? Just be kind to them. Just have lunch with them. I was called a clinical assistant, so I was helping with whatever the nurses needed me to do, right? And so I learned to have compassion for yet another group of people that the world had decided was unlovable, right? Criminals, abject poor, HIV positive men, mentally ill, right? Then I would go to work with creative students. I'm not talking about little painters and sculptors, no. I'm talking about head to toe black, pierced, tattoos, scary people that you would kind of go around the edge of the mall to avoid, right? You'd cross the street. Creative students that their parents had a hard time loving too. They couldn't really understand who was this child that I had. And I loved them. I just loved these creative kids. They were so awesome. They were so awesome to work with. And I worked with their families. And I kept going up in my career until eventually I was working side by side with greed-driven CEOs and C-suite kind of managers. And so again, yet another group of people that is hard to love. And so I look at all of those experiences in my career as being exposed to different kinds of people that I just had to show up and say, I'm here to help you with whatever job I had at the time, but I was here to love them and help them. It didn't matter. I just kept widening my circle of compassion and kindness and generosity and understanding. So I truly believe, like, God knew I was going to be a minister and all y'all were going to show up and I had to figure out how to love all of you, right? But I consider that some of my best spiritual education. Yeah, I ended up going to ministerial school and doing, the actual training of all that. But I really think my whole career, which I considered quite like a patchwork of a career, but I got to love a whole bunch of different kinds of people. And I didn't know that I really understood what I was doing spiritually until I got to the science of mind. And once I got to the science of mind, I finally understood the power of my decision to accept everyone. And it came from this. In the Science of Mind textbook, it said, the happy outlook on life is always constructive. The understanding heart is filled with sympathy and helpfulness towards all, and I underlined all. An evolved soul judges no one, condemns no one, but realizes that all are on the road to experience, seeking the same goal, and that each must ultimately find his home in heaven. Heaven is a state of mind, and that heavenly state of mind judges no one, condemns no one, accepts everyone. Our job is to evolve ourselves to the point that we can see our neighbors as neighbors. It's why we're here, to consciously create this neighborhood with each other, where we can love everyone and allow ourselves to be loved. I want to close with a reading. It's called The Paradoxical Commandments, and it was written by a man named Kent Keith. And just like that first quote I gave was wrongly attributed to Rumi, this reading is often wrongly attributed to Mother Teresa because she had it hanging in her orphanage in Calcutta, and so many people thought she wrote it, but she didn't. A man named Kent Keith wrote it. And it says this: the paradoxical commandments say, people are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you're successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs but follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. It was never between you and them anyway. And my final quote is from the master teacher of all things neighborly, Mr. Rogers. If you could only sense how important you are to the lives of those you meet, there is something of yourself that you leave at every meeting with another person. Love thy neighbor. Horoshku onigasamas. Would you pray with me? Here is what I know. What I know right now is that love is the truest flow of life through me. I know that's the truth for me, and I know that's the truth for each person listening this morning. I know that we have barriers that we have built, these barriers of fear that keep us from being the open channel of love that we naturally are. And so I know this morning a revelation of our true identity, a removal of one little barrier at a time until Spirit can love through us, as us, to everyone else, to every neighbor we meet. And so I know for each one present, an opening of a heart, an understanding of love. And so it is. Thank you.
So it is.